Hello, and welcome to another episode of Community Conversations, the podcast for those who have a heart for helping others. In this episode, we welcome a very special guest and Novocastrian, Tanya Davies, who is the MP for Mulgoa in Western Sydney. Tanya is a Liberal MP who is willing to go against the grain in the interests of her constituents. Many of you will have heard of Tanya on one of her live streams, but in this episode, we get to know a little bit more about what drives Tanya to have such a passion and conviction. To unpack this and much, much more, we also welcome our host, Pietro Di Girolamo. Over to you, Pietro.
Welcome, Tanya, to our podcast. It's great to have you here with us. Community Conversations is a podcast for those who have a heart for helping others, and we know that you have a big heart also. Where did the heart to serve and help other people come from?
Well, thank you, Pietro, for your invitation to join with you on Community Conversations and just to open up a little bit more about myself and my background. I think to sort of answer that question, it really is to go back to my childhood in that I was definitely raised in a Christian family, and my father was a minister, and he ministered in a church in Newcastle for many, many years. And I think just being involved in that environment and just watching my parents give so much of their time to other people and observe the impact that had in other people, not just inside the church, those that were having a difficult time, but also in the wider community. And when you actually live and witness the difference that another person can make in the life of someone else, to me, it was really inspiring. And to me, it just showed me that it was far more significant and meaningful to work to help others than it was to work to just do something superficial or frivolous. And that's where I think the heart for other people was born. I think moving on in terms of life and different life experiences, when you begin yourself to see how you are helping people, the smile on their face, the relief on their face, the stories that their life has been turned around, that their marriage has been saved, or that they've had an answer to prayer, or some miracle has happened, there's really nothing like it on earth. And I think that goes a long way to my motivation, as well as fundamentally what the Bible says, and that is that Jesus, God, loves us all equally.
Do you get back to Newcastle much? It really is part of God's great country. Do you get up here and visit the locals or your old stomping ground?
Look, I don't really. The life that my husband and I lead in Sydney is quite full on. But when I was a minister about 3.5 years ago, I was invited back to my old school in Mayfield, in fact, so Hunter Christian School, by my previous English teacher, who was in fact still teaching there at the time. So he invited me back to come and speak to all of the students as a minister of the New South Wales government. So that was the last time I've been up there, but it certainly is beautiful, and well done to our government for the major investment we are pouring into Newcastle.
Fantastic. And interestingly, my two daughters go to that school at
Mayfield.
Wow. Believe it or not, true story. Yeah,
it's a small world.
In year 7 and year 10, and they really, really love it. So thank you for the investment into that great school there at Mayfield. Recently, Tanya, on a Facebook live stream, you shared the story that you were actually struggling to high school. So we kind of a good segue here. I understand that you obviously said that was where you went to school in high school. Can you tell us about your high school experience and how did it help you become the person that you are today?
I started going to a school that the church that my father was a pastor in had started. I started at that school in the 70s. I'm disclosing my age now. When I was in 3rd grade, and I continued in that school right up through to halfway through year 10, so well into high school. So the challenges I experienced in terms of bullying were in fact at that school, not at Hunter Christian School, which was good. So for 4 years in high school, it was a very small school. It always had struggled with government funding, and as a result of a number of issues, it eventually did close its doors when I was in year 10. Hence, we all got shifted over to Hunter School, which was wonderful that they opened up their arms to, like 120 students in one day sort of thing. Yeah. But during the time at the other school from year 7 to year 10, as I said, it was a small school, and I was one of only 5 girls going into year 7, year 8, year 9, year 10. And so when 4 of those girls decide that they just don't like you, and they're going, you're the person that they've picked to make life very difficult.
Yeah.
There wasn't anywhere to hide. Like there was no other group that I could move to. I was just exposed all the time to their ridicule, to being locked out of classrooms, to all sorts of things that went on, right? And so I was raised, as I said, in a Christian family, and learnt about the power and the necessity of having a personal, private time with God. And I would read my Bible of a morning, and I'd pray, and I still have my Bible from that period of time, because all through the book of Psalms, where David spends a lot of his time writing about his enemies and how his enemies are trying to hurt him and harm him, and how he's crying out to God. I read those Psalms, and it was like I was reading my own words. Okay. And I was using those Psalms as a prayer to God, to say, God, help me, God, intervene, God, stop this. Why is this happening? Give me your strength, etc., etc. And I didn't tell anyone about it, because I didn't even tell my parents. I just thought that this is just what happens,
Yeah, of course.
But I used to wonder why God wouldn't stop it. Why is this allowing to happen for so long? Yeah. And it wasn't until many, many, many years later, when I look back on my life, I could see what he was doing in me as an individual, and how he was fashioning my inner strength, and fashioning my perseverance and my determination and my source of security and source of identity in him, not in friendships or not in people. And that has been a lifelong lesson that I now look back on, and I'm so grateful for, because I know that if I didn't have that experience, I would be less of an effective member of our wider society, particularly in these battles that you have in politics. And I think the other thing I mentioned on that Facebook stream was that the one, I guess, mental mantra I kept reminding myself when I got particularly down about it was, I would say to myself, high school will end one day, and this situation will end one day. And that used to encourage me. And I think just a postscript to that, it was probably about 10 years ago. So we're talking 25 years after I left school, yes, that I had a phone call at home, and it was from one of these girls.
Wow. Isn't that great? Yeah, that's awesome. Yep.
I had not kept in contact with any of these people. I can't even believe that she found me, because I'd been married. I changed my name.
Sure.
But she found me, and she rang me to say that she has now become a Christian, and she's trying to acknowledge the things that she's done in her past life that had harmed people. Yeah. And she wanted to ring me to say that she was sorry for how she treated me. And this is the wonderful grace of God, in that I was actually excited to hear from her. Yeah, I held no bitterness, I held no grudge, because I knew what God was doing in me through that time. And I was able to speak, release to her, speak forgiveness, speak well wishes to her, and healing, and all sorts of really positive things. So yeah, God, sometimes we don't understand what God's doing in our world, but you know what? The number one thing I've learned, you just have to trust him.
What an awesome response to our question, Tanya. What a great, powerful testimony of love and forgiveness, and your own strength and empowerment through the scriptures, which again leads us to the next question, which is similar along the lines that we're talking about now. At one time, you held the portfolio of health in mental health. You had a mental health portfolio. In that role, you actively sought out. So, is that a role that you actively sought out because of your experience like you've just shared. Perhaps you could share some thoughts about your time with that portfolio, and maybe you could share with our listeners some tips for managing our own headspace at the moment in this crazy world that we're all finding ourselves in, please.
Sure. The then Premier at the time, who was newly appointed as Premier, so Gladys Berejiklian 5 years ago, she selected her new cabinet, and at that time she asked me to be the Minister for Mental Health, Women and Ageing at that time. So I didn't actively seek any particular role, and it's something I believe what God says in His Word, that God elevates and God deposes, and I live by that. So I didn't know a great deal about the complex nature of mental health, mental illness, mental distress. So I went on a very big and very deep learning curve, and I have to say that it really blew my mind in terms of the scale of mental distress in our community, the complex nature of mental illness, and look, there's been a significant amount of transformation that has been happening in that area of healthcare in the last recent number of decades. But compared to other jurisdictions, particularly in Ireland, we are like 100 years behind where we should be. So, there's still a long way to go to help people with mental illness. I mean, obviously, there's a scale of mental illness. There's those that are incredibly trapped by their mental illness and potentially a danger to others. There are those that have transient issues, and then there are those that, stress and depression and anxiety for different situations that happen in their life leads them to that state. It's not like a constant state of being. So I think certainly there's been a big change in our wider community around speaking about mental illness, mental challenges, mental distress. We still do have a long way to go. And I think the thing that I've learned most of all is that people need to know that they can just speak out. It doesn't matter what they're feeling or what they're going through. And I've been having a lot more of these conversations of late during the pandemic. Emailing people back, ringing people. These are complete strangers to me, but they've contacted me through because of my live Facebook posts and my profile. So I've been ringing complete strangers and just speaking words of encouragement, words of hope, giving them information in terms of the phone numbers that are available for support. But I think the thing that's really important is that when a crisis like this pandemic comes, and a crisis like, in many cases, this forced vaccination mandate is impacting people's lives, and people are now losing jobs because of it. People are struggling financially, emotionally. They're worried for their children. This is a time that our society needs to come and help these people, not ostracize and not punish and not point the finger at. And I say to those people when I get a chance to talk to them that I say right now you're in a situation that has been beyond yourself. You did not cause this to happen to your family, so you should never ever feel ashamed to ask for help, because society and people that I know are ready to come running to support you to get through this momentary crisis. And so I think at the end of the day, speaking, talking, sharing, opening up is fundamentally critical to being able to help people, whatever their need is.
Look, there was a lot in what you just shared. At the end of our podcast, we always give the Lifeline number to people because we think they do a great service. And at times I've actually had to call them myself, going from one place to the other. And like you're saying, it's okay to speak out. It's okay to speak up because these are circumstances beyond our control. We're going to the next question for you, Tanya. And thank you so far with some brilliant answers to our questions. Speaking of the crazy world that we're living in beyond completely out of our control, you've got two beautiful young children. What keeps you awake at night when you think of some of the actions of governments and where the governments are taking us in our country and in fact around the world?
Good question. I actually haven't been asked that one before. Yeah, look, I think in terms of what's happening globally, there certainly is a very big push, and I feel a sense of media and cultural drive to the left of politics. Even America is now discussing a universal basic income, a UBI, which is like a form of government payment to every single person, regardless of their education or their position in life. So it really is like a socialist mentality, and it sounds alluring, it sounds lovely, but when you think of a news article this week that says we've opened up a whole heap of our community, but we've got shortages of workers, and the report is, well, they're getting paid $750 a week to stay at home. Why would they go to work? I mean, that is a fundamental, extremely dangerous position for any country to go down in, because if people think that somebody else is going to give them an income for no work, you will destroy the nation, you will destroy the country, because there's just not enough money to go around. Margaret Thatcher was quoted as saying the problem with socialism is that eventually you run out of other people's money.
Yep.
And one of the things that I love about the Liberal Party is that we believe in the individual. We believe in the individual innate ability to aspire, to work hard, to get reward for their effort, rather than a collectivism approach, which is a socialist, communist view. Individual freedoms are under attack, and I want to be a voice, and I want to be a person that speaks up against that and holds the line and draws it back. So I think for my children, I certainly want a free society. I want a society that is safe. So where there are dangers, whether that would be criminals, or whether that be things online or drugs, that there's government and there's the judicial system that is equally very hard against those issues that would damage a person. And also, for me, I really, my heart's desire is that my children would find their faith in Christ and live life with Him at the center, because it's like the parable about the house built on the rock or the house built on the sand. With our daughter, she's 14, we share with her, we're very open with our lives and with the battles that we have, the battles that I'm having now, with what's going on with mandatory vaccination. She sees me doing my live posts in the study, and at times she asks me about things, and I keep reminding her that, because we follow Jesus doesn't mean we have a perfect life. Quite the contrary. In fact, we're on the front line in most cases, battling and fighting for what's right and for fighting for people. And but I say to her, at the end of the day, though, like, you wouldn't have it any other way. The fact that you've got God's protection, God's provision, God's salvation, your eternity is secured. There's a great sense of peace despite the turmoil around your life. Illness in family, immediate family of my husband's dad passed away 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer. My mum's just had another diagnosis last week of cancer that doesn't look promising. So, like, the storms and the travesties of life will come, but with Christ in your heart, you have just an perpetual peace and assurance that come what may, you're never going to be alone, and He will hold your hand, or He will carry you through the hard times.
One thing just by hearing you speak, it's like, sometimes we have this persona of a politician or this kind of person who put you in a little box, but just hearing your heart just a few moments, I'm sorry to hear the situation that your mum's facing in the battle that you've got there, but you're on the front line and you're having an adventure of your lifetime, and your children are going with you, and so many of us are obviously following your courageous example. Again, just wanted to just let you know how much you are really loved and appreciated outside of your seat of Mulgoa up here in Newcastle. But I think all of New South Wales is championing you on, especially all of us that are Christians. We're championing you on there, Tanya, to keep going on. Just to go back a little bit, when you were a younger person, when you first became interested in politics, I did read on your profile that you graduated as a physiotherapist. You went to live at Regent's Park, stay with your grandparents when you were obviously studying at university. What triggered you to get into politics, and how did your time as a councillor for Penrith City Council in 2008? Then I know your husband was the mayor of Penrith. What influenced you in your interest in getting into state politics? That's a bit of a big jump from being the local councillor at Penrith to getting into the Liberal Party and state politics, please.
Yeah, great question. If I go back to when I was a child, I do have this very faint memory of holding my parents' hand, walking down this pathway into a school that had all this mess put up on its fences and all these people standing along this pathway trying to throw pieces of paper at my mum and dad.
Okay.
It was an election.
Okay, right.
And I don't know how old I was, but I'd never seen anything like this before. And I thought, what on earth is going on? And I just remember people saying, vote for whatever name, vote for this person, vote for, and I'm there going, but who are you? Like, what have you done for my parents? How have you helped my parents? You know, that was the thinking that was going through my head. And I thought to myself, if ever I was in that situation, I would make sure that I was out in the community finding the people that needed help and help them.
Yeah.
Now, years and years went past, and in fact, I even forgot about that experience as a young child. And what had happened, we were encouraged by an amazing, successful businessman who came from South Australia. He was doing a tour all through the churches in Australia, and he was saying, amongst many, many things, basically saying to the church, get out of the church and get into the community and reach the people, find the people, and befriend the people so you can share your faith. And he threw out all these ideas, you know, join Rotary or join the RFS or volunteer here or join a political party or do this or do that. And then both my husband and I, when he said join a political party, we kind of looked at each other and we said, are Christians able to do that?
That's great.
We had no idea. I mean, both my husband and I, we were not raised in very politically alert families whatsoever. So anyway, we decided, well, let's do that. So we joined the local political party in Penrith at a time when it was not popular to be a Liberal. Remember, it was very much a Labor area.
It was very much.
And then not long after, people encouraged my husband to get into local government, because I think they saw him as being future potential full-time member of parliament somewhere.
Yep.
And I encouraged him. I've always encouraged him to do whatever he wanted to do. And then it was about 3 years later that we were expecting our first child. And up until that point, all of my jobs in my career have always been around helping people, whether it was a personal assistant, a secretary, whether it was admin assistant. I was always helping someone else be successful, physiotherapist, etc. And so this time when we're in the car, and I remember it as clear as day. We're driving in the car. I was passenger. My husband was driving. We were driving down Maxwell Street in South Penrith. Okay. We were driving west. This is how much of a lightning bolt moment that happened. And he took a phone call from a lady that lived in South Penrith who said that she has 4 children, 2 or 3, I can't remember the number, but 2 or 3 had visual impairments.
Okay, yep.
And on their way to and from school, they had to step onto the side of the road to have a smooth, uninterrupted surface. Which was a danger to them. Could he fill in that missing footpath section? And being pregnant, I was incredibly maternal feeling, and I'm there going, oh, that poor lady, that's terrible. And anyway, I thought, wow, wouldn't it be amazing to be able to just fix it, like that. Anyway, the day later, I asked my husband, oh, what happened with that poor lady and those children? And he said, oh, that got fixed.
Beautiful.
I said, what? When you go to council, don't you just go and sit in meetings and come home? Like, isn't that all you do? No. No, what he did, he rang the general manager straight away. He said, this is a situation. I'm concerned it's a bit of a health and safety issue for these children. Can we reallocate the priorities of our, whatever team it was? And the general manager agreed, and they fixed it the next day. And I went, that's what I want to do.
The logistics team got onto it, fixed it up.
Done.
Hey, that's a really, really good answer. That's a really good story, actually. It's a good testimonial. Moving forward to 2011, Tanya, you're elected now the MP of Mulgoa with a swing of 23%. According to your official website, that's what it says, so I'm just going with that, which is an incredible achievement, taking the seat from a safe Labor electorate. What was that feeling like? Can you describe that feeling to our listeners, what that was like to take the safe Labor seat with a swing of 23%?
It's pretty good. Well, let me just give you some broader context to that. As I said, I got into local government because I wanted to make our community better, because I was literally bringing the next generation to live in my community. And I wanted to be really involved in fixing it and making it better. So, we leave a better environment, a better place for our children and their children. And so I got into local government and I was really active. I went out door knocking as a local councillor. I worked part-time and then I door knocked, and I went looking for problems. That's how I put it. I went looking for the people who are living with problems that needed someone to fix them.
Wow.
Anyway, I did a whole lot of work for a whole lot of people in that process. And then the opportunity began to present itself about running for the state government. And at the time, Labor had been in for 16 years, and in New South Wales, it was a pretty bad environment. And, nothing was being changed in my community at a state level, like hospitals, roads, schools, etc. And so I really felt, oh man, I think this is the right thing to do, but I really wanted to know if God wanted me to do it. And so I sought direction, prayer, my pastors, my dad, my mum, obviously my husband, his family, reading the word, talking to my friends, asking, is this what you want me to do? Is this what you want me to do? Do you want me to direct my life into this area? And I earnestly was asking for direction. And do you know what God said?
Tell me, what did he say?
Nothing.
Zero, zip, quiet.
Zero.
Silent.
Absolutely dead silent.
Crickets.
And I was getting so frustrated, because I'm like, God, I don't want to stuff up. I don't want to make a decision that's the wrong thing. And then my friend prompted this story in the Bible of Jonathan and his armor bearer in the Old Testament, where the enemies of Israel were camped above and they were taunting the people of Israel. And Jonathan got a sense of righteous indignation. And then he acted, and he said, come with me, let us go up, to the enemy, and maybe the Lord will work for us. And so he actually stepped out first in faith, not even knowing if God was going to work for him, but motivated and determined to right the wrongs of what he was witnessing. And in the process of actually taking that action, God then came in behind. And I thought, what? Maybe this is something that I just have to step out and just run with, and maybe the Lord will work for me. So it was an 11-month campaign.
Wow, okay.
I was on the ground, and it was grueling, very grueling. And the only time that God gave me an answer that this was the right thing to do was an hour after the polling booths had shut on election day.
Seriously?
Seriously. When we pulled up to our venue where we were going to have our little, dinner and watch the results come in with all our volunteers. And the sky was black as the ace of spades with a storm coming. And right above where we got out of our car, the sky had parted and you could see the bright sunlight behind it. And the sunlight was then streaming across the black sky in two straight beams going right across the black sky.
Wow, that's amazing.
In the shape of a V.
Wow,
for victory.
V for victory. It sounded like the parting of the Red Sea moment there, the way you were describing that.
Yeah.
It definitely comes across in your voice, Tanya, that I can hear the righteous indignation as being a core driver for you. In 2018, you voted against a bill that would create 150-metre safe access zones outside abortion clinics, which appeared to result in you losing your ministry portfolios in the 2019 election. Can you explain why you voted against your own party regarding this abortion bill?
That was it started in the upper house. It wasn't a government bill, so it was a private member's bill. And anything to do with social policy like same-sex adoption, abortion, euthanasia, our parties always give their members a conscience vote. So we weren't bound by a party line in that regard. I've voted against it because I'd had a number of stories sent to me, people I'd spoken with that just highlighted that there are many women that are on their way to have an abortion when they actually don't want to have it, but they just don't know any other way around the challenge that they find themselves in. And it could be a financial challenge, it could be a career issue, it could be an issue with their study schedule, it could be domestic family violence, like it could be any one of these really difficult areas. And in some cases, these women are provided with support services, like people that can actually talk with them and try and work with them to solve these problems that they're facing. And therefore, the woman has the support that she's been looking for and chooses to not proceed with the abortion. But having that exclusion zone meant that information and that support was going to be almost impossible to give them.
We actually did a podcast not so long ago about a place called Zoe's Place. It's a group up here in the Hunter where women who've got an unplanned pregnancy can actually go for support, some counselling and so forth, to be able to navigate some of the things that you've raised with us. So it's great that those opportunities are available for people. So it must be hard to go against party lines, but the people of Western Sydney and in fact around the state have flocked to you because of it. I recall you saying, Tanya, that you started on Facebook with 4,500 likes and you're up to like 83,000 last time I looked. So obviously you're very popular. But what made you, what do you make of that? And how does that make you feel with the way that people are responding and gravitating towards you?
Look, I had no idea that any of this would happen at all. In a lot of ways, it's a little bit terrifying that there's so many people that are watching you more closely than ever before. But what it shows me is that what I was like completely aghast at, when the government made that decision that construction workers and tradies in the local government areas of concerns would have to be vaccinated before they could go back to work. When that was announced on the Saturday night, there was something in me, I don't know how to describe it, but something in me that said that is not right. And when I feel that something is not right, I'm not saying it's not a good idea. I'm not saying that, there's some, rough hairs around the edges, we can just work it out. But no, when something is simply not right through and through, I cannot stay silent. I can't keep my mouth closed and just let it happen. I have to speak out about it. And look, at the end of the day, I've never determined to get into this role as a member of parliament because I personally have some career aspiration I want to achieve. I've only ever got into parliament because I want to make our environment, our place that we are living and raising our families better and safer and a wonderful place to live and work. And so I'm not worried about, oh, is this going to damage my any future, potential promotion because I'm arguing against something or other. It's that I'm not governed in that way, and it's a great sense of freedom.
Yeah, it's like you've got nothing to lose and everything to gain by putting yourself out there with, as you said before, your words, righteous indignation, like Jonathan had, standing up for the underdog and standing and championing for the poor. If the saying is true that selflessness is expressed through parenthood, the new Premier, Dominic Perrottet, has 6 children, which represents a lot of love and others focused. That said, there's been quite a bit of backlash, even from young people on TikTok, which is that social media platform for young people, and there have been a lot of comments about it. How do you feel about this, and what does it say about inclusiveness in our society?
Well, it's very sad. It's very sad and very disappointing that it seems the only inclusive people that society wants to include are the ones that fit with their mind frame and mindset of what is supposedly an acceptable way of living. So we're seeing it played out, between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated, within families, within workplaces, within communities, within sport, etc. I read another email that a daughter who's not vaccinated, her mum has said, you can't come to our place for Christmas because you're not. I mean,
That's sad.
It's just like, it's pure madness, absolute madness. And, if Dominic Perrottet, or let's say another person, from the other extreme of life, say someone that is married in a same-sex marriage and has adopted children in their same-sex marriage, like if they were Premier one day, well, the left and probably many young people would be cheering from the mountaintop. But that's their person. That's what they chose how to live. The issue that society has to pay attention to is, well, what's the policy that this leader is going to bring to our community? That's what they should be judged on, not who they are as a person, and not their lifestyle or not their beliefs. Like, that's their personal life. And like Dominic said, he's disappointed by that, but let's move on and let's judge me by my outcomes as Premier. Well, it's the same philosophy. Whatever background or lifestyle a leader has in politics, society at large should judge them by their policy and by how they lead the nation and help people and bring answers to problems. And so, look, it's just some pretty cheap shots that are being thrown his way. I hope it dies down, and that when we start to really see Dominic Perrottet's hand at work in our government and in our wider society in terms of bringing quick restoration from the lockdown pandemic, and improvements to families and quality of life, hopefully those comments will vanish.
Back to the Premier, Dominic Perrottet has a strong Catholic faith, and we applaud him for his convictions. What can you tell us about this family man whom you've known probably for quite some time?
Well, he got into politics the same year I did, 2011. He is a very, very intelligent, very smart individual. He's quite quick. He's quite quick-witted, funny. He is relaxed, which is good, which is nice to have in a leader. He loves his family. His faith's very important to him. But he also understands the role that he's in. He's in a role that is to represent and to work for everybody in New South Wales, just as my role is in my electorate of Mulgoa. And prior to the same-sex marriage plebiscite, I was door knocking and I met a lady in one of my suburbs, and she asked me straight up, said, how are you going to vote? And so I'm honest with my electorate, and I told her. And I got an earful from her because she was in a same-sex relationship.
Yep.
So we had a discussion about why I believed what I believed and all the rest of it. And at the end of the day, I said to her, look, I'm never going to convince you to change your view, and you're never going to convince me to change my view. but it's good that we've had this conversation. However, at the end of the day, my role is to help everyone in my community. So if you or your partner need assistance with any state government matter, then reach out to me and I will help you. So just again, showing that you can have disagreements, showing you can have civilized conversations, but at the end of the day, in politics, you're there to serve everyone who puts you in that position, even those that didn't vote for you. If they need your help, you're there to serve and help them in return. And that's the view that Dominic would have.
Now, you mentioned your husband's name was Mark. I'm not sure if you mentioned, but I'm just mentioning that I acknowledge that your husband's name is Mark, and you've got two beautiful children. You mentioned you had a 14-year-old daughter. Tell us what gives Tanya Davies the most joy about being a wife and a mother?
That's a good question. I think looking back, my husband and I, we've been married 25 years.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
What's that? Is that silver?
Yes.
Silver. Excellent.
And we celebrated it by sitting around the dinner table with our children.
Very romantic. Very
nice. was in lockdown.
Yeah.
I think looking back and just seeing that we're still together after all that time, and a lot of people haven't been able to get themselves in their marriage, and I feel for those people, because everyone generally starts off in marriage with a view of life together, and so when that dream breaks, it is heart-wrenching. So I think looking back and seeing that we're together, that we understand each other more, like your relationship develops and you learn more about each other, you learn to accept, you learn to forgive, and you as a person get better in that process.
Yep.
So if I look back to what I was like as a new bride,
yep.
I'm glad I am the person I am today. So I think the personal development is really joyful, and also sticking together through life, just the ups and the downs and the surprises, the disappointments, the joys, the heartaches, just having that person there that will always be there, that will have your back. Fun times, and the kids is really an adventure as well. Like selflessness is very true as a parent, and sometimes if my job a period of time is really demanding, I get quite tired, and so I'm stretched in that role, of course, trying to be a giving and a loving mother late at night and the weekends when you never get a day off anymore as a parent.
No.
So hopefully that gives you some idea.
As you were answering that question, I have another question. So what would be your advice to people who are married and experiencing trouble at the moment through their marriage?
Well, if they're people that are people of faith, that are Christian, the great advice that our pastors gave in a recent sermon, the two most powerful words that you can say to each other, really at any stage of your marriage, is let's pray.
Let's pray.
Yep.
Yep.
Because problems come through a whole range of avenues. It could be external, it could be internal, it could be personal. But when you bring God into it, when you bring God into the center of it, and you work together towards that central point, you really are going to unlock the power of God to work in you, to work through you, and to work outside of you. So obviously there are others in other situations where there's much more complexity, that they may require more professional counselling or psychology or that type of level of involvement, and there is no shame whatsoever in doing that, if that's what's going to rescue your marriage.
Wow, fantastic interview. Finally, Tanya, is there anything else that's close to your heart that you can share with us so that we can work together and then share hope in this community of ours?
The thing that has been close to my heart, I think just for the last couple of years, has been this word of kindness, and trying to build kindness into our life. into our words, our tone that we use, our actions, our driving on the road, our interrelationships at work, with our neighbours, little things, even things that are hidden, doing something for someone that they don't even know it was you, but spreading those seeds of kindness in your world, wherever your world reaches, can really make a major difference and just change the atmosphere of a family or a workplace or a society.
Yeah. Simple things like kindness and the tone of our voice, and even a smile, don't you think, Tanya? Just having a smile and saying thank you when having your old school friend ringing you up out of the blue and somehow they found out where you were and just said, look, I'm really sorry, I messed up, or I apologize. Simple things like that are so true today, like they've never been before, haven't they? We've really got to go that extra mile and just be so kind to one another.
Indeed. I think be proactive about it. Don't just think about it, but do something, like act on it.
Again, I'd just like to thank our very special guest, Tanya Davies, the Liberal MP of Mulgoa, for sharing with us what drives her to have a heart to care for others. If you enjoyed this podcast or something has resonated with you, can I ask you to share it with your friends? Leave a Facebook or an Apple podcast review and connect with us through all our social medias. It would be great to get 83,000 followers, just like you, Tanya. It might take us some time to get there. If there's anything that was shared today that has caused you distress, we'd encourage you to reach out to Lifeline. They're open 24 hours a day. The number is 131114. I'd like to thank our audience for listening, and thanks again to our executive producer, Michael Smith. I'm your host, Pietro Di Girolamo. This has been another episode of Community Conversations. Until next time, be kind to one another.